Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by the following: IU Health Southern Indiana physicians, primary care and specialty care providers now accepting new patients in Bloomington and throughout South Central Indiana. siphysicians.org, IU Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, working to improve cybersecurity and provide policy guidance through partnerships with industry, government, and academia.
Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com.
And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. Recent attacks on the trails in Monroe County have some people worrying about their safety.
Running alone is not the problem. It goes way deeper than that.
More on the recent attacks coming up, plus how the city is responding. In the 24/7 cycle of news coverage, even kids are getting inundated with political stories. Just ahead, we'll hear what they have to say about this year's election.
You don't get to control the whole world.
No,
you get to
what?
control your whole country. The whole country of Indiana.
That's a huge thing of my social studies curriculum, is to let kids know they have a voice. They need to be a person who participates in society.
Chaotic is a word frequently used to describe the race for the White House, particularly when talking about the Trump-Pence ticket. Ahead, a political analyst joins us to break down candidate campaign strategies. All that, plus the latest on this week's top stories, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. The Bloomington community is on edge after several attacks on pedestrian trails over the past few months. Just this week, police say a man grabbed a woman and pulled her off a trail while she was running. Barbara Brozier has more.
The most recent attack happened in the wooded area behind me when a woman was running on her own. And like other recent incidents, it happened during the day. That has many people questioning their own safety. But Bloomington police say there's no reason to. This is where you'll find Allie Beckman 5 days a week.
I run for the exercise, but also because I like the way it makes me feel.
She runs mostly on pedestrian trails in Monroe County, oftentimes alone.
I've never questioned my safety. I, in fact, feel pretty safe in Bloomington.
But recently, her mom asked her to take more than just a water bottle along for her workouts.
I don't know. I don't really know how to use it. I mean, I've been getting people telling me to carry a gun or get a knife. Well, I don't really know how to use those things either.
The suggestions started coming after reports of attacks against women on local trails. The most recent incident happened at Winslow Sports Complex just before noon.
She stated she had been running on the trail when she'd been grabbed from behind by a male who was wearing a blue ski mask and had a black hoodie zipped up. She fought briefly with him. She managed to knee him in the groin. He ran off, and she stayed and called 911.
In June, Bloomington police responded to an attempted abduction on the Beeline Trail. And just 2 weeks ago, a woman reported being sexually assaulted while running on the Clear Creek Trail. Beckman ran along that route the same day.
It's very infuriating being a woman and feeling like you can't do things by yourself.
But police say increased awareness of crime along the trails doesn't equate to an increase in actual crime. Police say of all the case reports taken in Bloomington, 1% take place on trail systems.
There is no spike. There's not an uptick in that type of crime. It's just these types of crimes are very important. They're very serious, and so they reach public attention.
The city is taking steps to address some of the issues as part of a new safety initiative.
You know, we make sure that the vegetation is trimmed back. The Parks Department does a good job of that, and you know, when we can, we're going to try to have more foot patrols and bike patrols on the trail also.
In the meantime, some residents say they simply don't feel safe taking to the trails alone, but not Beckman.
It just makes me want to be out here a little bit more, using the trail more, because that's what you have to do. You can't just sit at home by yourself.
The city of Bloomington is installing video cameras on problem areas along the Beeline Trail. It's part of a pilot program, and they say if it goes well, the safety initiative could be expanded.
Police are still determining the best type of cameras to purchase and have no timeline for installation. Now for headlines, we go over to Lindsay Wright, who has the latest on this week's top stories.
Thanks, Joe. Oral arguments in the lawsuit that challenges the Religious Freedom Restoration Act's so-called fix have been postponed until November 2nd. Arguments were scheduled to begin earlier this week, but the judge cited conflicting schedules as the reason for the holdup. Bloomington, Carmel, Columbus, and Indianapolis have all since passed human rights ordinances that protect gender identity and sexual orientation. The Indiana Family Institute and American Family Association of Indiana allege the fix infringes on their religious liberties. The ACLU of Indiana is suing the Boone County Jail on behalf of a Muslim inmate. Gannon Thomas alleges the jail refuses to serve him meals that conform with his faith. In a federal complaint, he says the jail frequently serves him pork and other non-halal meals despite his request for a special diet. The ACLU filed the complaint on Thomas's behalf, saying the Religious Freedom Restoration Act specifies a government agency cannot burden a person's religious exercise. The lawsuit requests the court to require the Boone County Jail to serve Thomas a halal diet and award financial damages and attorney's fees. State officials are beginning to approve projects for funding as a part of the Regional Cities Initiative. The first 3 approved are in and around the Fort Wayne area. Regional Cities is the state's first major effort to motivate counties to collaborate on economic development. The state is spending $42 million on each of 3 regions, including the Evansville area, the Elkhart South Bend metro area, and 11 counties around Fort Wayne. Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton says he's frustrated with the delayed construction schedule of I-69, and he's scheduling open meetings with the Indiana Department of Transportation, the Indiana Finance Authority, and the construction contractor.
When you're going to do a public-private partnership, you're doing that to be efficient. Well, everybody who's driven in there knows there were a lot of periods when they weren't working on the road. We later found out they weren't paying the contractor, so they weren't working. Well, that's not efficient.
The October completion date was pushed back to June of next year. Hamilton hopes the meetings will increase transparency on construction progress. The city plans to schedule another meeting in 60 days. The trial date for Indianapolis-based Anthem's merger with fellow insurer Cigna is set for November. The date could mean big trouble for the massive deal. The DOJ sued to block the $54 billion acquisition on the grounds it violates antitrust laws. Anthem was pushing for a decision before the end of the year, which would allow the merger to gain necessary approvals from state regulators and close before its April 30th deadline. Complaints to an Indiana state agency prompted a federal investigation of Vigo County School Corporation's contracting procedures. The state examiner for the Indiana State Board of Accounts says the agency received information that triggered a special audit. Information gathered during that audit led to a federal investigation and June FBI raid on the corporation's offices. The Indiana Department of Education has asked for a $600 million increase in funding from the legislature for the 2017 fiscal year. Officials say the funds are necessary to expand state-funded pre-K for all kids, increase tuition support for all schools, and bump up funding for small rural schools. The department also wants to expand a tax deduction. Parents of private school students are eligible for a tax credit to help offset the cost of textbooks. Instead, Superintendent Glinda Ritz wants a $1,000 tax deduction for all families to help offset the cost of textbooks. The 2017 General Assembly convenes in January and will create a budget for the next 2 years. After a recent string of high-profile sexual misconduct cases involving school staff, Some legislators want schools to investigate their workforce more often. They're asking the legislature to examine the costs of background checks every 5 years. Currently, Indiana law only requires background checks at time of employment and only for fully licensed educators. Local districts determine how to check the histories of non-licensed staff. That includes coaches, custodial workers, and volunteers. A new report from the American Cancer Society's Cancer Action Network finds Indiana is lagging behind in cancer control and related patient access policies. Indiana meets 4 out of 10 policy recommendations. Last session, Indiana lawmakers considered a $1 hike in the tobacco tax as part of the road funding debate. That proposal ultimately failed. Experts say nearly half of cancer deaths could be prevented if people stopped smoking, ate healthier, exercised, and were screened more. You may be able to have an alcoholic drink the next time you visit Indiana Dunes State Park. The Alcohol and Tobacco Commission voted unanimously to grant liquor licenses for dozens of entities, including the restaurant and bar and banquet hall at the Dunes. That license was approved under a state law passed this year that allows the Indiana Department of Natural Resources to obtain alcohol permits for its parks without most of the usual requirements. That law circumvented county officials' rejection of the restaurant's initial request. Opponents of the project contend it's a sell-off of public land that should be free of commercial interests. The state fair ends this Sunday, and alcohol availability at the fair has expanded each year since the legislature authorized alcohol sales in a 2014 bill. First, beer and wine were only available at an exhibition closed to anyone under 21. Last year, the fair added sales at concerts in the Coliseum. And this year, alcohol is sold at free stage concerts. But some worry the expansion could change the tone of the fair. The bill's author says he envisions alcohol sales remaining confined to the entertainment venues and the ongoing beer and wine exhibition, but there's nothing in the law keeping it there. Indiana's corn and soybeans could be headed to a record year. That's according to the first crop production report for 2016. Purdue agricultural experts say the weather was in farmers' favor. A U.S. Department of Agriculture predicts the second largest corn crop in Indiana history with the largest soybean crop. 3 co-chairs for presidential nominee Donald Trump's Agriculture Committee are based out of Indiana. They include CEO Marcus Rust of Jackson County-based Rose Acre Farms, Mike McCloskey, board chairman of Fair Oaks Farms in Jasper County, and Kip Tom, the CEO of Tom Farms. Tom, McCloskey, and Rust join more than 60 other agriculture co-chairs, including former and current Republican governors and lawmakers from the South and Midwest. Students around the state are back in class and for many the school year started last week. Seven Oaks Classical School, a new charter school in Monroe County, was slated to open earlier this week. Its building construction project is behind schedule though, so the grand opening won't happen until next month.
Ashley Cherry is a busy mom of 5.
Now what are you gonna do?
She considered every option when determining where to send 2 of her 5 kids to school. They started out at a private school, but when she heard about Seven Oaks, she wanted to learn more. She liked what she read and thought Seven Oaks could be a place where her children would thrive.
Just for my children, I mean, you have to, I think, evaluate each child in a child-to-child basis. But for my children, I think it'll be a really big benefit for them to have.
She was drawn to the back-to-basics approach the school says it will take, using a phonics-based reading program and teaching Latin. Charter schools are public schools that use taxpayer dollars. They are tuition-free and have open enrollment. But opponents question whether charter schools actually should be considered public. And in Monroe County, the school comes at a time when some say the education community should be rallying together.
When you have a sudden development like a charter and students and funding move away from the public schools, then cuts have to be made.
The Indiana Charter Board denied Seven Oaks authorization twice and then sought authorization through Grace College and Seminary, which ultimately approved the school. Last month, the state awarded Seven Oaks a $2.8 million loan for construction, and that's a big reason board member Terry English says the school will open this year instead of next.
If we put it off another year, then we don't have any students coming to our school. We receive no money from the state of Indiana for their education. Therefore, we don't have any way to pay for the loans, and therefore they won't loan us any money.
Although it was a financial decision, English says the school isn't willing to wait even one more year to get these students involved in this process.
George W. Bush will hold a fundraiser for U.S. Senate candidate Todd Young in Elkhart next month. The Associated Press obtained a copy of the invitation for the September 12th fundraising event featuring the former Republican president. Young is a sitting GOP congressman who represents Southern Indiana. He faces former Indiana Governor and U.S. Senator Evan Bayh. The sculpture Flamenco is located on a street corner in Columbus, Indiana. It's been there since 2014, but as J.D. Gray reports, the sculpture formally became part of the city this week.
Flamenco is located outside the Columbus Commons. It's intended to resemble a woman dancing. It first arrived as part of the Columbus Sculpture Biennial. After a warm reception, Columbus residents raised more than $40,000 to purchase the sculpture for the city.
Everyone should experience art, and having public sculpture that is accessible to all is really important to me and I hope to everyone.
The city will be given additional money to maintain the sculpture. Eventually, the statue may move from the corner of 4th Street to a new location.
There has been discussion about where it will be located permanently. That really will be up to the city of Columbus to decide.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm J.D. Gray.
And Joe, that ceremony took place on the artist's birthday this week. She turned 84.
I've seen it. It looks great.
It looks really
Thanks,
cool.
Lindsay.
You're welcome.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Even though this group isn't allowed to vote, they have strong opinions on this year's election. Lindsay Wright visits an elementary school to see how it is addressing the year in politics. And it's the only type of art exhibit that's meant to get wet. We'll show you how the new display at IU's Art Museum works. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
I can change the world with my own 2 hands, make it a better place with my own 2 hands. I'm gonna make it a brighter place with my own 2 hands. I'm gonna help the human race with my own 2 hands. I can hold you in my own 2 hands, and I can comfort you with my own 2 hands, with my own 2 hands.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. The election season often brings out the analyst in all of us. Lindsay Wright joins us now, and she spoke with the group who's studying the candidates.
That's right. Thanks, Joe. It's easy to get caught up in talking about elections, but we often forget kids are listening, and it's causing them to have opinions of their own. I sat down with a group of 10 to 12-year-old kids to talk to them about how they see this year's election.
Are these things filming right now? Yes, they are.
Are they filming?
Yep. They are.
Meet Kaylin, Alonzo, Jaden, and Willow. They opened up on how they feel about presidential elections.
I think that a compliment about the elections is that they're really good at arguing.
Do you think they should be a little nicer?
They're sort of like what she said, they're acting like preschoolers. They're like sort of making it look like children would make better presidents, because many people are saying they're gonna start World War III.
You think kids would make better presidents?
If kids would make
like your age?
Between the arguing and stuff, I think that we could probably pull it off. Yeah. About the same.
What do you think makes a good president?
A good president cares about his people.
You just said his people.
Yes.
But it might not be a he this time.
Be a her. It might be a she or a he. That's what I'm trying to say.
That'd be pretty cool, I guess.
Yeah, it would, because having our first woman president would be cool. To have one woman president out of 48 man presidents? Is that right? 48 or 47?
If Hillary Clinton became the president, it's not the first lady anymore, what would we call?
The first sir?
The first sir?
Yeah, maybe. First man?
First husband?
Wait, so there was first lady, so there should be first guy?
What do you think would be fun about being president?
You get to control the whole world.
You don't get to control the whole world.
No,
you get to control your whole country. The whole country of Indiana.
Do you think the US is the world?
Do you think that you should be able to vote at a younger age?
Yes.
And that's pretty normal, according to 7th grade social studies teacher Hogan Stanger. He says kids are not shy about sharing their opinions on elections.
It's pretty crazy because you do have a bunch of 12, 13-year-old experts, or so they assume to be.
When Stanger teaches about elections in school, he encourages strong opinions and respect for others, but also critical thinking.
In one side of it, I really like that they have these opinions, but sometimes you really just kind of have to take a deep breath and say, like, come on, guys, let's get some evidence behind what we're saying.
Stanger says this presidential year is one for the books and will probably be a time period his students will remember for the rest of their lives. That's why he's excited to incorporate it into his curriculum.
I'm really looking forward to it because there are so many resources that you can use that you'll probably never be able to use again in your life, or there's never been any election even remotely close to kind of what we're about to see.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Lindsay Wright.
And joining us now is Dr. Laura Albright. Dr. Albright is a professor at the University of Indianapolis. She specializes in American politics and state and local government. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You know, it's just funny, we just watched the kids call presidential candidates preschoolers, if that says anything about how this election is going. But I'm starting to see a little bit of those type of, you know, that banter, negative campaigning, even on YouTube and things like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that effective?
It is to an extent. We notice with negative campaigning, if you focus on the actual issues, that can be really effective because essentially you're telling voters how this person voted on a certain issue or how they feel about a certain issue. That is helpful. If you're going for personal attacks, that tends to be less effective and it can actually backfire on the candidate.
I wanted to bring up that dynamic between Trump and Pence. Has Pence finally found his role in the Trump campaign?
I think so. They have a really interesting dynamic, like you mentioned, because Trump is really loud, boisterous, dramatic, and Pence is very much the opposite. I think it's been a challenge for Pence in some ways because Trump says things that can really upset a number of voters, and Pence has to come out there and really toe this precarious line of not correcting his essentially boss as the presidential candidate, but making sure he clarifies the remarks. So it's difficult, but I think Pence has done a pretty good job so far.
Well, now Pence is out on the campaign trail for Trump, so he's not in Indiana, although the governor's office does say that he's available at a moment's notice. But how does that change the dynamics in Indiana at the governor's office?
Sure. Well, it is a full-time job, and so is running for vice president. So he's essentially doing two things at once. That makes it really challenging. Thankfully, our state legislature doesn't meet until January, and oftentimes the things that are most important for the governor to do take place once the state legislature is in session. At the same time, we expect to see a lot of people in his administration kind of picking up that slack and doing what they can in the governor's absence.
So now let's bring this back to a little bit more to Indiana, because now we have a new candidate for the Republican gubernatorial nomination, or candidate for governor. Yeah. How does that shake things up with Holcomb and John Gregg.
It's really interesting because a lot of Gregg's basic arguments in his campaign were anti-Pence, and you can attach some of that to Holcomb. He was lieutenant governor essentially when Ellspermann stepped down earlier this year, but he wasn't lieutenant governor during RFRA, which is one of the things that many people were very upset about Pence during his administration. So the Gregg campaign has had to kind of twist what they're saying a little bit in the campaign, and of course there's an interesting dynamic there because most people don't know Eric Holcomb, though he has been lieutenant governor for a couple months. So it makes it a really fun race to watch.
And before we go, we're just 80 days from the election. So we know what happens to Governor Pence if Trump wins.
Yes.
But what happens to Pence if he doesn't? Where does his career tend to go?
It's the million-dollar question. I think part of it depends on if they were to lose, by how much. But the good thing is for Pence, he gets national recognition. He gets his name out there. As long as he doesn't make any missteps, this could really set him up for maybe Pence 2020, Pence 2024. It's really tough to speculate, but that won't prevent us from doing so.
And we have to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. The Indiana University Eskenazi Museum of Art welcomed a new exhibit this week in an unusual way. People pelted water balloons at the ground in front of the art museum, where a new water-activated exhibit called Rainworks is on display. The artists used stencils and a special coating to create the designs. The goal is for the art to make rainy days happier.
I hope it really just kind of inspires students to understand that art can be an everyday part of their lives, and that it can appear in unusual ways and make the normal world a little bit more special.
Rainworks will last 2 to 4 months depending on the weather. And that's the end of this program. Our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by the following: IU Health Southern Indiana physicians, primary care and specialty care providers, now accepting new patients in Bloomington and throughout South Central Indiana. SIphysicians.org, IU Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, working to improve cybersecurity and provide policy guidance through partnerships with industry, government, and academia.
Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com.
And by WTIU members. Thank you.